Money Wolf is sponsored by Aaron Gold Group. Check them out at aarongold.net. Now, back to the show.
Welcome to Money Wolf. This is Money Wolf coming to you from the Money Wolf Den. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Welcome and thank you for tuning in. Let's look at this last week. This last week, we had President's Day, which is still officially Washington's birthday in federal law, not President's Day by statute. Started informally after George Washington's death in 1799, with people celebrating it on his actual birthday of February 22nd. Became a federal holiday in 1879 under President Rutherford B. Hayes, first for D.C. workers, and then expanded nationwide by 1885. 1968, Uniform Monday Holiday Act shifted it to the third Monday in February, starting in 1971 for more three-day weekends. Oh, you gotta love Congress, man. I tell you what, everything has to be an act. That's why we have that whole term of an act of Congress, because if you want Congress to do anything, there's got to be an act for it. Public, state, and retailers combined it with Abraham Lincoln's birthday of February 12th and pushed it to President's Day and named it in the 80s via sales and observance, even though Congress never officially renamed it. Gotta love the private market. They figured out how to take something like two holidays, combine them into one, and then figure out how to make a sale off of it. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. More important parts of it. It's a low-key federal holiday. Banks, mail, government offices are closed. Reflects the U.S. leadership, legacy, and icons like Washington and Lincoln. Often sees an honoring of all presidents broadly. Yes, that's all presidents broadly. Whether that be, the first one or the latest one. We've had good presidents. We've had bad presidents. We've had mediocre presidents. So that's what we get for being, the country we are. But you know what? It seems to work for now. But when it doesn't, it'll change to something else. That's what history shows us. George Washington was born February 22nd, 1732 in Popes Creek, Virginia, and died December 14th, 1799 in Mount Vernon, Virginia. He was the first president of the United States with the presidency of April 30th, 1789 to March 4th, 1797. And he's also the one that set the precedence of the two-term limit, which was held up until FDR. And then after FDR, they decided to codify that. He was the father of the nation. He led the Continental Army to Revolutionary War victory and presided over the Constitutional Convention. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. He is the first president of the constitutional government. We actually had a few presidents before then, but those were under the Articles of Confederation. And then we got old Abe Lincoln. Gotta love Abe Lincoln. Born February 12, 1809 near Hodgensville, Kentucky, and died April 15, 1865 of assassination in Washington, D.C., days after the Civil War ended. One of the things that I've always thought was really kind of interesting is that April 15th, which here in the United States, of course, is tax day, usually, is that bad things tend to happen on that day, whether it be poor President Lincoln being shot, the Titanic sinking. There's a few other things I can't think of right now that are really bad on a national and international level that always happen on April 15th. So I always thought that was kind of weird, but that's just me. He had the presidency from March 4 of 1861 until April 15th, 1865, of course, when he was shot. Oh, man, he preserved the Union. He was a moral force against slavery and had iconic speeches like the Gettysburg Address. And yes, he did. He was a wonderful man. He was an honorable man. And he is a person that we should look up to. And then moving on, we had a rough week this last week. We had the legendary Robert Duvall, who is a legendary actor and Oscar winner. He passed away on February 15th at his home in Middlesburg, Virginia, at the age of 95. Can you imagine that? Living to 95. His first role was as Bo Bradley in To Kill a Mockingbird, and he was 31 when that happened. He was 31 years old. on his first role, and he died at 95. He had the iconic roles of Tom Hagen in The Godfather, and then Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore in Apocalypse Now. You know, the famous "I love the smell of napalm in the morning." You know, and that has spun off so many catchphrases, including the ones that we use here on Money Wolf and on Wall Street in general. Oh, I love the smell of money in the morning. And then, of course, there was Tender Mercies, which he won an Oscar for, and Lonesome Dove, along with being with Sir Michael Caine in Secondhand Lions. And one of my favorite scenes of all time in cinema and movies, is the fight scene in Secondhand Lions, where Robert Duvall, Michael Caine, and Billy Joe Osmond are at a country store in Texas, and they're having lunch, they're having ribs. And these teenagers come in, they start hassling them, and they hassle Robert Duvall's character, who's Hub McCann. And the funny thing is that Michael Caine, you know, tells him before he starts fighting, you know, don't get hurt and don't kill him. You know, and then he grabs the first kid by the throat and says, "Who am I? I am Hub McCann." And then he goes off onto this big old long speech about the wars he's been in. And, you know, one of my favorite lines is, "I have loved only one woman with a passion that a flea like you could never begin to understand." And when people look at the love that I have for me and my girlfriend, they see that. You know, I get that compared a lot, and I just love it. It is just one of the best ones. But the nice thing about it is it also reminds me a lot of my daddy, because after he gets done being the Jesus out of these kids and teaching them how to fight with a knife while disarming them at the same time, they all go back to Hub's house, and not only get a lesson in life, but they also get free steaks. And before those steaks are cooked, they're taken out of the fridge, of course, which Hub and Michael Caine's character puts it on their faces, you know, bring the swelling down. You know, they go in as kids, you know, just wanting to fight and wanting to really just raise havoc. And, you know, they leave men that know how to fight, men that learn when to fight and when not to fight. And that, frankly, there's just some things in life you need to learn hand on. If you ever get a chance, see Secondhand Lions. You won't regret it. You won't. Then moving on, we have also the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who passed on February 17th of 2026 at the age of 84 in Chicago. He was a civil rights leader. He was the protege of Martin Luther King Jr. and founded the Rainbow Coalition, two-time presidential candidate in 84 and 88, and fought for equality, economic justice, voting rights, and an inclusive America. He was a moral powerhouse, fiery oratory, inspired generations, and pushed bridges across dividers, and was leadership beyond politics in the streets, faith, and social justice. I've had my issues with Jesse Jackson over the years, but overall he was a good guy, and we need a lot more people like that. We need a lot more people who are willing to build bridges with everybody. There it is. Just this last week we lost two really great people. We honored two really great people. And that was before the bell opened on Tuesday. It was real interesting. But moving on, Friday, February 20th, Supreme Court ruled 6-3. Ruling struck down most of Trump's sweeping global tariffs imposed under the emergency powers like the IEEPA. And ruling that the IEEPA does not authorize broad tariffs, pushed policy back to Congress for checks and balances, and some tariffs dropped to 10% economic baseline while others wound down. There was an immediate effect on the markets on this one. As soon as that came out, all that money is going to be going back to the corporations that paid these tariffs. So, everybody's stock went up. The Dow rose 0.8%. And consumer costs on stuff like electronics and cars and groceries are going to go down. Positive future outlooks of reduced risk on trade wars, retaliation, and giving businesses breathing room for real innovation. Tech, green energy, diversification, steadier prices for folks, more predictable trade draws and investment, bolsters dollar stability, and wins for long-term economic balance and competitiveness, which is a good thing. Oh, going on with the week ahead, which is February 23rd and onward. Post-President's Day reset, watching executive power in action after the tariff checks. Well, we already know how that's going to go for a little bit. President Trump has already indicated that he's not really concerned with what the Supreme Court says, and that he's just going to go off and do whatever he wants. The Consumer Confidence Midweek PCE inflation gauge is coming up, along with the PPI manufacturing reads. That could influence markets and rates. Iran talks are ongoing. Geneva progress, but deadlines ticking. The U.S. buildup continues in the area as far as naval strike groups, with potential limited strikes if no deal. So we better watch our oil and dollar volatility. Winter Olympics is also wrapping up. Medal tallies, U.S. performances are lighter on the cultural front, but it's been a pretty good Olympics this year, especially that curling. The curling in the game of curling during the Olympics, there was a guy that accidentally touched the stone a little too long, and not only was it a big issue at the time, but people made a lot of memes off of it, and it was kind of funny. But the Olympics are always full of surprises every year, or every time that they happen. Not every year. Good Lord, could you imagine if the Olympics happened every year? Ooh-wee. Oh, this next week we're looking at cautious optimism with tariff curves that could stabilize things. Data and diplomacy keys are on a steady ride. Just an addendum to the podcast, some clarification here. The IEEPA, which stands for the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. That's the one that President Donald Trump enacted the tariffs under, that was struck down by the court. It was enacted in 1977 under President Jimmy Carter. It's a federal law, Title 50 U.S.C. Section 1701 through 1707, that gives the president broad authority to regulate international economic transactions and commerce. The president can declare a national emergency in response to an unusual or extraordinary threat to U.S. national security, foreign policy, or economic issue or economy that's coming mostly from outside the U.S. Allows the blocking and or freezing of assets, regulating imports, exports, prohibiting transactions, importing sanctions. Basically deals with foreign threats via economic tools, sanctions on countries, entities, or individuals. The recent Supreme Court ruling of 63 on February 20th struck down Trump's sweeping global tariffs because IEEPA doesn't authorize imposing tariffs, despite the administration's argument that the regulated importation covered it. The court said no, it does not. Tariffs are a separate congressional power. This curbs executive overreach on trade of taxes and pushes policy back towards Congress for more balanced dealings. So just something to consider there. I mean, a lot of us are not aware of what some of this stuff is, so I figure I'd go ahead and throw this in at the end just in case people had a question about it. And then there's the PPI, that's the Producer Price Index, which is a monthly measure from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It tracks the average change over time in selling price that's domestic producers receive for their goods and services, mostly on the wholesale producer level of its inputs and upstream inflation. So there's that. And then there's the PCE that we talked about earlier, the Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index. This is one that's a little bit more unusual, but it is one that we do work with every once in a while. It's from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, part of the monthly personal income and outlays report. Measures changes in prices for a wide basket of goods and services bought by U.S. consumers, households, or on their behalf, including out-of-pocket spending plus stuff paid by employers/governments with health insurance or Medicare. It's broader than the CPI and adjusts for shifts in consumer behavior and weighs categories dynamically and captures most of the full economy. I'm going to bid everybody good day. As you may have, as you've been able to tell, my voice is not of regular sound this week. I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold, so I apologize for being a little bit on the impaired side, but I wanted to get this information out to everybody and make sure that we stayed up and stayed current. So again, I apologize for my voice and my difference in cadence. Just playing this off. Hopefully I'll be better next week, and then we can go from there. In the meantime, Money Wolf wishes you a I should not be doing that while my voice is like this. All right, folks, I'll catch you next week. I appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully I haven't destroyed your eardrums with my voice, which I am now quickly losing. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, get out there, make some money, and howl a little bit.
Alright, moneymakers, that's a wrap for today. This is Money Wolf signing off. Thanks for riding along. If you enjoyed the howl, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Drop a rating or review. It really helps the pack grow. Now, all the boring details that no one really cares about. Copyright 2026, Money Wolf Media Network, and Aaron Gold Group, LLC. This program is sponsored by Aaron Gold Group, LLC. You can reach them at aarongold.net. Now, we're done.
Subscribe to the Money Wolf Podcast, your guide to financial freedom. Join the pack now.